budget idea.
All right.
But as of right now, yeah.
All right, everybody. Ready to get started? So thank you so much for being here today and being a part of this conversation and hopefully the ongoing collaboration that comes out from this. We wanted to start with introductions, and I can start by introducing myself so you know why I'm talking to you. I think I actually know most of the people in the room. My name is Catherine Carell, and I'm with Downtown Colorado, Inc. We are a statewide association of what I refer to as community and economic development champions. And we have been working in the state of Colorado for 40 years. We really work around place-based improvements, partnerships, and collaboration. And we do a lot of different things. So we do advisory services, educational services, advocacy and information, and then we do a lot of training around the specific types of organizations that can drive your initiatives. So urban renewal authorities, business improvement districts, downtown development authorities, different types of nonprofits, cooperatives, economic development corporations, all of those are our partners. And this particular region is very dear to me, and I've done downtown assessments in both Walsenburg and Trinidad, helped both of you with getting your urban renewals up and running, looking at Main Street and Creative District here in Trinidad, working with the different arts community, the tourism in Walsenburg, and so I'm really excited to be back. And I'm back with an official process because I feel like most of the time I come, I'm like, hey, I'm driving through, let's chat. And so I'm really excited that we're here as a part of this roadmap process. And the roadmap process is a big deal that came about as a recovery mechanism for the state of Colorado. There were 16 regional teams formed. And that was a process put together by the Department of Local Affairs in partnership with Office of Economic Development and International Trade. And we have James Russell from DOLA here with us today. But the South Central Council of Governments put out the response to the call for teams. And so, do you go by SC? Whatever. Your acronym sounds okay. So the COG, the COG has been really a leader in pulling together different partnerships and talking about how you can collaborate more. And so, if you haven't met Jennifer, the new director, here she is, and I'll allow her to just introduce herself and talk a little bit about why and what they're hoping to get out of it.
Thank you, Kat. I just love her. I'm 2 months into the job. My name is Jennifer Oliver. I'm the new director for South Central Council of Governments, SCCOG. I think we're just referred to as COG. All of you know us as COG. It's the most obnoxious, one of the most obnoxious acronyms, I think.
It's just hard to say, right?
We're just kind of a piece of the, I don't know. Anyways, but I'm really happy to be here, and I too know many of you in this room, which makes me happy that I've been here 2 months. I've already gotten to know many of you. To those I haven't met, I'm looking forward to working with you, and I'm thrilled to be here. But so the role of the Council of Governments is, as I see it and I understand, I come here from Washoe County, Nevada, which is northern Nevada, and with over 20 years of working in local government. So I've worked with all of these different pieces: economic development, housing, broadband, higher education, health, public health, emergency management. And so to me, to be able to come here and sit at where I sit and be involved in all these different initiatives here for this region is very exciting to me, especially at this time, especially when we're kind of kicking off this roadmap process. So we kind of are able to receive federal funds through the Council of Governments, and that's why it's important for us all to work together and be sitting at this table so that we can come up with solutions that are going to work for your unique needs. And so that's where the Council of Governments kind of fits in that role. And so I'm happy to be here, and thank you for coming.
you. And so just a quick review of what we're going to do today. So we're in the process of our kickoff coffee. So there is coffee outside. If anybody isn't familiar, the bathrooms are right down that hall over there. There's also a drinking fountain. So if you need water or anything like that, you can get it there. We're planning to be here from 10 to 1. We will be having pizza delivered later from Sexy Pizza. So what we're hoping to do is really talk about kind of what your hopes are, and then we can give you a quick overview of what we have been planning in sort of the smaller planning committee around the roadmaps, looking at the housing approach. There's actually 3 focus areas that were identified in the original application and the original conversation. So it's housing, economic development, and broadband. So we'll talk a little bit about where economic development and broadband are as well. And then we're going to talk about overcoming the challenges that are out there, making change through your region, closing and next steps. And as we said, this is a kickoff. So this is the beginning, but this is something that hopefully will not end, right? So you are here and you are part of setting the stage, and we are looking for something that will be lasting and will help you all accomplish the things that you're trying to do. I'm particularly pleased to see so many of the doers here. So at Downtown Colorado Inc., we call ourselves the doers, and we tend to gravitate towards the champions and the people who are really making things happen in their community. And so when I look around this room, I'm excited with the group that's here. But we're also going to be asking you who isn't here, and how do we get more people here that need to be here. So today will be a little bit of exploration. We'll be talking about what we've been talking about so far. We're going to have some case studies where we'll dive into what people are trying to do with housing, where are they hitting challenges, how do we get past those challenges, and what do we want to see in the future, okay? But we will also touch on broadband and economic development. Right, okay. So, so this is kind of our full team in the housing dialogue. There's other steps going with broadband, and then we're thinking that with economic development, those projects will sort of evolve through this process, right? Like with housing, there's obviously going to be economic development initiatives that come out of the conversation, and there's a lot of things already taking place. So what we're hoping to do today is really capture the things that are taking place that we maybe aren't all aware of, thinking about the synergies and the ways that we can collaborate better. And so that's where we're going. But what we wanted to start with is introductions, and we have some time in our schedule to go through the room and have everybody introduce themselves. We do have some very important folks on a Zoom call who were not able to be in the room with us, but we can start with having them introduce themselves. As always, I have a thing you gotta do when you're introducing. So you'll introduce with your name, the organizations that you represent, and
what is your biggest goal for regional collaboration?
What is your biggest goal for regional collaboration? Thank you, Kylie. And so if we can start with the folks on the phone, I'm hoping that you can hear them.
Yeah, Derek, maybe start. Oh.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I don't know if you can see me, but I'm here. Thanks so much, Kylie and DCI team, for kicking it off in person. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. My name is Derek Webb. I'm a senior planner and project manager with Bohannon Houston, part of the consultant team supporting this roadmap work for you guys and a couple other regions throughout the state. Let's see, goal for regional cooperation, participation, that kind of stuff. My goal as the consultant, or as a part of the consultant team, is just to support the momentum that you all clearly have in the region to really push and propel what comes out of the roadmap process into very actionable strategies and implementation activities for the future to address, all of the focus areas that Kat just walked y'all through. So I'm here to support. I'm here. I'll probably be in the background taking notes, and if you need me, just yell and I'll chime in. But overall, I'm again here to support Kat and her great team. So
Thanks, Derek.
We have Carl.
Hey, Carl.
Mike's over
Hey, this is Carl Young, Worthington County Administrator. I would say my biggest goal for this region is sustainability in both our institutions and in our prosperity.
Thank you.
Kayla. The mic's over there, so you
Oh,
might want to.
Kayla.
Hi everyone, thanks for having us. My name is Kayla Torres. I'm with New Elk Coal. We're the coal mine located about 25 miles west of Trinidad along Highway 12. I'm really just here, I'm really interested. We're a big employer, so I'm just trying to learn more about housing in the area and what's coming. It's been an issue that we've kind of been dealing with, so really just here to learn more. Thanks.
Thanks for being here.
And then, yeah, I think these two joined the Zoom, so.
All right, and then Tom, would you like to start, and then we'll go this way?
I'm just the cameraman.
Oh, you got to introduce yourself.
Sorry. I'm Tom Murphy. I'm with Trinidad Times TV and Miller Murphy Funeral Home. As far as goals for regional collaboration, I think things are moving along pretty well, and so I'm not really a part of that like the mayor and the kind of commissioners and stuff like that is. So I think it's rolling along pretty well. So I'm just here to watch and film.
Well, we might call on you. Kylie.
I'm Kylie Brown. I'm the Rural Program Manager with Downtown Colorado Inc. So I am helping with all the coordination of this project.
Awesome. Hi everybody, my name is James Russell. I'm with DOLA. I guess I view regional collaboration, and my role is, we know that as the state there hasn't always been a flexible response to what housing needs are. So it's really about learning what our opportunities are and how we can best promote what works correctly and well for the own community. And I hope to be looked at as a resource, and I'm here for any of your needs. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I'm really looking forward to it.
Great.
Hi, I'm Talita Gillespie with the City of Trinidad. I'm a grant writer for the Economic Development Department, and I'm just excited to meet everybody in person. I came on last year in the midst of COVID, so this is really wonderful. And I do want to say that I have such appreciation for Tom and what he does, because it really does help us know what's going on in the region, having the YouTube channel of all the meetings and stuff. So thank you.
My name is Electra Johnson. I am I'm a consultant, designer, architecture, planning, and I am working with the Gardner Main Street Board and with Huerfano County, and I grew up in Huerfano County. And I guess my goal here, and my family came to work in the coal mines in 1916 or 1950, right around the time of Ludlow, and my great-grandfather was a union organizer, and my goals are to create sustainability, or to help facilitate sustainability and kind of a transfer of knowledge from this generation to future generations, so we have jobs and rural prosperity, so there's not such a divide, and so that we're building sustainable housing that lasts for future generations too, and we're thinking about what we leave our grandkids and our kids, and what the future of Southern Colorado looks like, because I love this place.
Hello.
Okay, my name is Wally Wallace. I am Economic Development Director for the City of Trinidad, Colorado. I think I'm very similar to what you said. I'd like to see us collaborate in a way that creates sustainable, lasting growth. I think this region is very unique to the rest of Colorado, in that we haven't seen the exponential growth that the rest of the state has seen since post-World War II, pretty much. And I'd like us to see less booms and busts and more just continued growth, while also not completely duplicating what's happening around the rest of the state. I think that Colorado has become more expensive, more difficult for people to be able to live here in a with a high standard of living at a reasonable price. And it would be my hope that as a region we can kind of find a way to see that growth while also maintaining a level of affordability that you don't see in other places.
I'm Michael Uhrman with the Southern Colorado Economic Development District. We represent 13 counties from Lake all the way out to Baca County and along the Arkansas River in Kiowa. I'm here on behalf of the City of Trinidad and Huerfano County working on incentive programs and a potential housing development project for workforce housing in Huerfano. And regional collaboration, the biggest thing for me is economies of scale and buying power.
I'm Karen Wilson. I own Little Plaza Inn, and I'm your case study today. So I came because Kat asked me, and so I do what she says.
I'm Sarah Jardis. I am here on behalf of the Spanish Peaks Business Alliance, which is a group formed under Huerfano County Economic Development to work with our local community businesses and collaboration and community building within our local business groups. I am also a real estate agent, and I relocated to this region from Eagle County, high country, ski country, about 6 years ago, and I think a lot of what Wally mentioned is really important to me, that we have an opportunity in this region to work together to try to learn together and from each other what to avoid and what we can do together. I think we see a lot of areas in proximity to us that have had a lot of success, but maybe in ways that we'd like to try to avoid. So I really hope that we can maintain that affordability and sustainability and do it together.
My name is Sophie Leone, and I'm here with the Trinidad Urban Renewal. And the two things I'd like to see is our strategies and try to support and growth. I'm also a business owner, so it makes a lot of sense, but I can't say it any better than what Wally said.
Hi, I'm Carlton Croft. I'm the Director of Economic Development and Tourism for Huerfano County. We have been focusing on regional collaboration. I've spent quite a bit of time with the Pueblo business community and also down here in Trinidad to see how we can work together for regional growth. And, we're starting to see some success. Just came from a great meeting at Trinidad State about education. So excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you in person, Carlton.
Good to meet you.
Yeah.
Good to meet you, right?
Yeah, you have known.
Hi, good morning. My name is Ed Griego. I am chairman of the Trinidad Urban Renewal Authority, and I believe the regional collaboration is a great thing because we share common problems. We need to find common answers. That's the support that is available. So, reason I'm here today because that's one of the things that share information, gather knowledge from others and other participants. We have a whole lot of different ways that come about with this. So, we will watch today.
Great. And Lou Ray? I see you hiding.
Ray King, South Central Council of Governments. I'm not sure what you're doing because I just walked in.
Oh. You can just share your biggest goal for regional collaboration.
My biggest goals. I just think it's important that we start looking at the area as a region instead of just one county versus the other county or one community versus another community, that we're all going to grow and prosper if we do it as a region.
Thank you.
Mayor Phil Rico, City of Trinidad, and my biggest concerns actually is to be able to understand and how do we maneuver as a region through all the red tape that's out there. And I've been to, this is probably the fourth meeting on housing that I've been to. It's the same thing. I've not seen much come out of it as to how to maneuver through this red tape. whether it's state funds, federal funds, ARPA funds, whatever. So I think as a region, we need to get a real clear understanding how to maneuver through the red tape to be able to make real changes to what we're all trying to do.
Yes.
I'm Mike Valentine, I'm city manager of the city of Trinidad for about another 2.5 weeks. So my hope is, I'm not leaving. My hope is that this isn't all good lip service, because I've seen it for 35 years where everybody says, yeah, we all got to get along. My hope and goal would be that we move forward, and I thank the team for putting this together, and hopefully great things come from it.
Thank you, Mike.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Felix Lopez. I'm the chairman of Los Animas County Commissioners. And one of the goals, I want to take a whole different perspective on this. When we think the government is the wherewithal, I think the question was asked, who's not at the table? You know, one of the great models that we saw for many years was Habitat for Humanity, and that really worked. At Trinidad State, I happened to be employed there for my entire career. One of the things that we did, we had a collaboration with Habitat for Humanity, and some years we built 3 homes. We had a robust building trades program. So the students learned from foundations to you name it, all the way to erecting a house. The training was great, and the community was also involved. So is the model that we're trying to do here, where government is going to take all the wherewithal to solve the problem? Who's not at the table is probably private investors, and then beneficiaries of this housing as well. So I think an assessment and the perspective that would be there would be that we need the stakeholders, the benefactors of this particular program, to have some buy-in. You know, because if I say this is good for you, drink it or take it, perhaps I don't have the expertise. Are there assessments? You know, in every meeting I go to, whether it's at the national level, at the state level, housing is a huge thing. Not only here in Colorado, but heck, I was at a meeting in Washington, D.C. a few months ago, and it's the same thing all over the place. I just want us to take a look at for a moment and see if indeed what we're trying to do here is working. Thank you.
Phil Dorenkamp, Los Animas County, and I guess I see goal of regional collaborations, in my opinion, I can't speak for Los Animas County or the commissioners, but from a Los Animas County standpoint would be more of a support role, especially when it comes to housing, because we don't have the utilities, et cetera, to put in housing and get utilities to them. And then a second thought, and this is something I learned from soon-to-be ex-city administrator Mike Valentine, and that is come up with something that's workable. I mean, we can have, and I'm going to show some of my cynical side here, we can have all these meetings, we can continue to have all these meetings, and continue to have meetings, and continue to have meetings, but frankly, we need to start turning dirt somehow. I saw it happen in the Arkansas Valley, southeastern Colorado economic development, I believe, was the tip of the spear on that, and they are actually turning dirt and putting up houses.
Mayor Bud Bros, town of Kim. For those of you who possibly may not know where the town of Kim is, we are in Los Animas County. We're 75 miles down 160. Anyhow, Kim is a town of, like me, older senior citizens. So consequently, our population is kind of starting to dwindle. But we're hoping that the possibility of maybe housing, that we can get some people back to the town of Kim. We do have a major wind charger project coming up in the area within the next 2 or 3 years. And we're a little concerned about if somebody from this company that's going to be doing this would be wanting to possibly be able to purchase a home or something in Kim. Because we do not have any housing
available in town. There is property that it could be purchased, but then you got to build houses. Also, I am a member at large on the board of directors of Southeast Colorado COG.
8. Wonderful. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rhonda Epper, and I'm with Trinidad State College. We serve this region as, Los Animas, Huerfano County. We also have the entire San Luis Valley. So we have been in this community for almost 100 years. I would say that we are both a consumer of housing because we have a lot of employees who are having a hard time finding housing when we're trying to recruit employees. We also are trying to be part of the solution. We have established or reestablished a construction trades program, and we have support from the Attorney General's office to help us purchase homes that are in a dilapidated state, renovate them, and then sell them back into the community. We are currently renovating 2 houses right now in Trinidad, but we have funding to continue this program. It's really, I think, the primary obstacle right now is finding students. And we just haven't had a lot of students take advantage of the program. It's been in place since last March. We generally have a handful, 5 or 6 every session. The sessions last for 1 month. It is an attractive opportunity for students if we can find them because we pay them a stipend through our grant from the AG that offsets the tuition. Almost 75% of their tuition is covered through this stipend. So it's a way for a student to get started in the skilled trades if they're interested in that field. I think we're competing with jobs because most prospective students could walk onto a job site without the training that they would be getting through our program. But we are trying. We're trying to be part of the solution.
Do you have housing for students? I know that sounds circular, but
we do.
Like if people, okay, so if people relocated here to do that program, sweet. Okay. Fun, thank you.
Good morning. My name's Gay Davis. So I'm similar to Mr. Valentine in that I have about 2 weeks on my current position, which is with the school district in Levita. I've spent 20 years in education as a grant writer, project manager. But prior to that, I'm now sitting here as a developer. So as the mayor, Mr. Rico pointed out, navigating the availability and the red tape as a developer is extremely difficult. There's not an available resource to go to that has the answers that a lot of times even can point you in the right direction. So you're pretty much on your own in trying to find the appropriate resources to even start a project, let alone have it shovel ready and actually turn in dirt. So I think from a resource standpoint, a couple of things that I would like to see come out of that is from a regional point of view, having a point person who maybe doesn't have all the answers, but at least if they have an available resource that can begin to point you in the right direction. And then communication and transparency would be huge.
Great. Now I would be completely remiss if I did not call on Mr. Galusha, who was out of the room when his time came.
So, and what are you asking?
You're supposed to introduce yourself, talk about the organizations that you represent, and your #1 goal for regional collaboration.
Okay, so I'm John Galusha. I'm Huerfano County Commissioner, former administrator, former Public Works Director for Pueblo West Metro District, and former economic developer for Southern Colorado with STED. I'm also the chair of the South Central Council of Governments for the remainder of this year. And what was I supposed to say?
What's your number one goal for regional collaboration?
Oh, for regional collaboration. So, what I would really like to see is the same rules applied across the boundaries. So, so we have several different communities and a couple of different counties. It'd be really nice if the rules were for development were the same across the boundaries.
Nice. Cool. Now, before we go on, I want to ask James if you can tell me what your number one goal for the roadmap process is.
Awesome, absolutely. So I feel like the number one goal of the roadmap process would be to help communities understand and really learn from communities how we could be that missing piece in this development process. I've heard a lot of wonderful things from the entire group and where the connections are made. For example, Trinidad State, I know we've been working with other communities talking about, is there opportunities for concurrent enrollment? Are there opportunities where we can augment some of the pay to help these students be able to perform in some of these schools? So the number one goal I would say is, how do we help cut some of the barriers of some of the grant writing and some of the opportunities that do exist, and how do we promote them so that we can actually get some housing developed in some of these communities? The real truth of the matter is, each community is different, and each community has a variety of different goals and what type of housing that their housing needs. So it's just, how can we have this conversation about making it as easy and as accessible for everyone to get the level of quality housing that they need, at least when it comes to this group's roadmap process. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, and he was talking on the way here about cutting the red tape and and really streamlining your access to the different resources. So I think based on what we're hearing from you all, you're actually going to be happy with where we are, where we've been so far, and I think that we do have great people at the table to help drive this process the rest of the way. Sorry, can you jump back 1 second? So just to highlight, so we do have this group, which is sort of the full group of the roadmap, and we are looking at housing primarily with the idea that yes, broadband impacts that, yes, economic development projects will come out of that and be involved in that, but this group meets monthly. And I want to make this clear that we will invite you all to join those. The majority of our meetings are going to be virtual, but we will have these in-person meetings, and we do think it's important to get together, have that time to be face-to-face. All of us that are driving together are wearing masks because I have a compromised person at home, so I have to be very careful, but we're happy to be face-to-face and happy to see you all. So we're investigating, addressing the barriers that are out there, looking at opportunity sites and trying to get a real inventory of those on a regional level, thinking about how we bring in conversations. We have some case studies that we'll look into today, and we will be documenting those for those of you who share today. Looking at infrastructure capacity, because that will obviously impact your ability to do housing. Thinking about the pre-development strategy, so the resources that you need and how to get you there. You know, you come in and really thinking about that from a local investor perspective, right? Like, it's great to have somebody from the outside come in and build a huge housing project. Maybe that's not going to happen, right? But if we have people who are already here who want to invest, how do we make that possible? And then co-investment strategies. So what is the public sector's role in helping the private sector get things done if you're aiming towards the same vision and goal? And then we have a section that's working on broadband. They have separate meetings, and they will be talking about that. There's a lot of movement from the Colorado Broadband Office right now, and there's different funding for that coming down. So we didn't want to be remiss and miss any of those opportunities. Carlton can add some insight on those, or Derek, as we go through this process. And then economic development is sort of the meat and potatoes that many of us have worked in. And so we will not be neglecting that, but I think there's always a lot to do in the economic development world, and a lot of that will keep moving. And so we're going to have some presentations through to, not presentations, but we will have some input from SCED, from Wally, from anybody who wants to share projects that they're working on in addition to the case studies that we have today. I have touched base with several of you about sharing those later on. Okay, so now the big question is really, how do you eat the elephant? Yes, Mr. Mayor.
You have these 3 different groups that meet periodically. Do they meet, is it all virtual, or are they going around the region in person?
Right. So with the housing one, which is our primary focus right now, we're doing those monthly meetings virtually. This is our first in-person meeting here. I think in the early stages of the process, there was a meeting in Pueblo before we were involved. But we will, kind of do the in-person ones as needed. But what I'd also like to see come out of this is putting together working teams. So if there's specific folks who are looking at what are the incentives that you can put together from the public sector to support the private sector, how can we team up, Gay with Michael, who's outlining those incentives, or thinking about how we do those so that you guys can actually do a lot of this work. So we want to talk today about actually how to get things done. So it's not about us driving it, but it's about us helping you build a structure so you're driving. And so you can have in-person meetings. We will have those monthly virtual meetings, but we will also be coming back. As you know, I always turn up. You can't really keep me out. I'll be back. But so the idea is that, yes, this is an elephant. It is a big beast to conquer, and we do need to do it as a team, and we do need to take a bite-sized approach. So we've been looking at some smaller pieces of it that we can look at little by little. So, how we're approaching it is first investigating the regulatory barriers. The good news is that Trinidad, Huerfano County, working with Walsenburg, have already received grants that are called, yes, IHOP like the pancakes. And that stands for Innovative Housing Opportunity Program. And so both of those entities will move forward. They have received the grants, but I don't know if they've signed the contract. So they're just about at this stage where they'll be looking to put together an RFP and bring in a consultant where they would actually go in and look at the zoning, look at the parking requirements, look at all of the pieces that may be holding back investment, and thinking about how you restructure those. Now, one of the things we've been working on at DCI, and this, has sort of come out from all of the comments I've heard from all of you over the time, is thinking about code hacks, right? Like, what are the things, like if you're trying to get more housing, here's some tricks you can do. So really think about how you can simplify that to get out of the way, right? To really streamline those processes and help make it possible for people to invest. And I am, once again, not necessarily talking about a huge investor. I'm talking about a smaller local investor and how we pave the way to make that easier. So that piece is moving forward, and those grants have been received. Inventorying the opportunity sites is really thinking about all of your dreams, right? Like everybody has a spot that they've either purchased or they've been eyeing or that they know about, or there's this building or whatever it may be. It sounds like there's a lot of different types of sites. Some of them are owned by people who would like to develop them but can't because of those barriers. Some of them are owned by people who might want to invest in them but they can't because they don't have the money, but they would, right? So just kind of thinking about what is the owner dealing with. Some of them are owned by people who are just sitting on them and we don't know why. And they don't want to sell them. Or maybe they're speculating. Maybe they think they're worth 10 times what they are. And so getting to know the owner and getting to know those sites becomes very important. So what we're looking at is an investigation of some of those sites. We may not be able to do a full inventory and investigation of all the sites on the first go, but we'll pick, a few. And we're enlisting some support to help identify a co-investment strategy. So part of that is if you have sites and those owners are sitting on them and they think that they're worth 10 times more, maybe we need to tell them what it would actually take to develop that site, right? Like maybe if it needs cleanup, maybe they don't understand that they could actually be held liable, right? Like there's a lot of different pieces to redevelopment. So helping those owners understand what it would take, what resources are available to them, why they may want to pass this on to somebody else if they're not prepared to do those things, right? So all of that becomes a conversation about co-investment. I'm thinking about those incentives that are out there, and so we'll have Michael share some of what he's been developing. And then thinking about that technical support for pre-development strategy. And these are all things, the technical support for pre-development strategy, we've already lined up a meeting for Huerfano County to talk to the folks who do that, so that is in process. And Los Animas, if you'd like to set up that meeting too, we can set that up and you can just kind of talk to these folks. But it'll be really important for us to understand what the opportunity sites are so that we can work through that process with you. Questions on any of these three? And we'll be talking all day, so don't worry. Okay, next. Okay, so as you can see, we've heard a lot, right? There's the regulation, which might be the zoning, the requirements on a site, and that's one of the barriers that we see in a lot of places. The other two are capital, like getting money. So if you have somebody who wants to develop something locally, how do we help them find the funds to do that? How do we support them? Whether that be the incentives, or that be loans, or that be, grants, whatever it may be. But then there's kind of what Gay was talking about, the expertise, like how do you get through the system? So if you're a small investor and you want to develop something, and every time you have an inspection, you need to re-pour your concrete, you may go broke before it's done. So thinking about both the capital, the expertise, and the regulation, and in the middle there, we find that sweet spot where it's like the vision is getting done, your local people are empowered to do it, and you have a public-private partnership where the public sector is contributing to what's happening in a positive way, not driving it, Mr. Lopez, not driving it, but not inhibiting it, okay? So, yeah, I think it's laying that foundation. Mm-hmm. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
So that's kind of our goal, and that's the approach that we've been looking at this elephant. Okay, and so this is just my little cake. So the regulation and infrastructure is sort of the foundation that allows us to build on. The building communication, where we're actually in touch with and understanding what are the challenges that our potential investors might be having. Understanding their uses and how those align with the vision of the public sector and the vision of the community at large. And then making pathways to that access to capital and expertise is the little cherry on the top. Okay. So I will now shut up. I'm sorry. Are there other questions or discussions? I know you guys have a ton of ideas. We want to jump into some case studies, but if there's any thoughts on what I just shared, I'm a fast talker and I've had a lot of caffeine.
Okay, one of my questions would be from NOLA and from all the government partners. Has there been an assessment of all the legislation that was approved regarding building and regulations? So many of that has to be green materials. One of the biggest impediments is assuming that building is business as usual. And if we had that information, it would be great to have a cheat sheet. This is what you're going to be doing, obviously, because if it's a multi-unit, now you have certain regulation that's going to be applicable to that, and depending on the number of units. And also, realistically, I was speaking with a contractor a couple of days ago, and he was telling me that per square foot, the cost of square footage has gone probably between 50 or up to 50%. So that is, that was his assessment here in Los Angeles County. So the word affordable housing now has taken a whole different perspective and definition.
Mm-hmm. And so in terms of a state analysis, I have not heard of anything that has been done. Has anyone?
I'm not familiar with one, but I can definitely check out. Can you explain a little bit more what exactly you're looking for in this?
Well, yeah, you know, there were so many bills introduced that builders, and one of them was, I think the governor vetoed it, that if you had so many units, you had to have also connectivity for electric vehicles. So that was particular vetoed, but at the end of the day, we don't want to run on assumptions, and we don't want to get sideways once you have a project going forward, because the responsibility is going to be both on the city and the county approving those permits, but also has to be compliant with whatever legislation has been approved. And one of the contractor was actually sharing with me that if you build and I think you mentioned 20 multi-unit new, so much of that, a percentage of that has to be of green materials, whatever that means. So, and that's what I'm referring to.
So like the correct me if I'm wrong, but the STAR energy efficiency requirements. Like you're looking for like a cheat sheet that had all that information on for potential developments. What all are these regulations I have to? Is that okay?
And I would imagine that our building inspectors are up to par with all of those regulations, but as representatives or participants on the group, I like to have, just for us as a reference, something of that nature.
So
And how it drives up the cost, and then also if you could check into this legislation that was either proposed or maybe passed when it comes to fire-resistant materials.
Yeah.
Out in the areas that are prone to those wildfires, I think mostly in the mountainous country. And I think here in Los Angeles County, I don't believe we're going to be affected by that yet, but I have no doubt that eventually we come in this direction.
Okay.
So I think what would be helpful also is anytime you start playing with somebody else's money, whether it's state, whether it's DOLA, CAFA, feds, the level of accountability. So, you know, I think being able to understand those requirements, which again goes back to almost LEED certification and or CHIPS or something like that, that might obviously impact your budgetary constraints.
I think it'd be interesting to see the state actually do an analysis from basically the 2000 IBC to 2021 and the additional costs, because now we have sprinkler systems, we have HVAC systems. I can name about 45 to 50 grand in costs just from the 2015 codes to now. And it's monopolizing materials, which I also think we're seeing a shortage of. So the communities that are, and I've run a building department for 15 years, so I just don't see the incremental energy efficiency versus cost that we're getting from, say, the 15 codes to the 2021 codes with all the additional costs. And I think it's well put that if you're going to get funding from the states or the feds, they want you to bring the codes up. And I don't think they realize that there's a huge cost to the affordable housing, and their money basically is just an offset to those codes.
Are there policies, are the regulations for your adoption policies for those codes, are they standard for the different agencies, or does every agency kind of do their own?
The International Building Code is adopted by the local authority,
but usually there's a lag, you know, for when they can actually implement those, like from the inspectors and things.
Yeah, I don't know which codes each community are on.
Right, so there's no, there's not a standard, so Wharf and Oak could be doing something different than Los Animas.
The only one that's mandated from the state is the electrical code.
Right. Because that's huge. That's huge, actually. That's a huge issue.
When an entity adopts a code, you don't have to adopt the entire code, right? So, like Worthington County took pieces of the WUI code to adopt that, but we did not adopt the entire WUI code while urban interface.
So, I'm not sure if anything currently exists yet So would it be beneficial to talk to maybe some communities that have the type of housing that you are aspiring to build to get a better understanding of what building codes they have and what pieces they adopted?
I think the National Home Builders Association would certainly have a document that weighs in on the incremental costs of each code, and having a representation from the construction industry, because they're ultimately the ones that have to do it.
You know, one of the problems that I see is that, you know, I was in the building material industry for 40 years. And back when I started, there was $30 per square foot to build a house. Today it's over $200 per square foot to build a house. The biggest problem that I saw throughout the years is every time that they added a new building code, and we have to adopt it. And like you said, you don't have to adopt everything, but if you don't adopt something within that building code, it could become a liability if you don't adopt it. So that's the problem that exists within the building codes. So now the cost of, you know, over $200 per square foot in this area is extremely high. And a lot of these smaller contractors years ago, when they were building at even $100 per square foot, they were willing to build individually. Now you get these smaller contractors, they probably don't want to deal with all these additional things, so they just quit building. So we kind of, you know, we're kind of hampered by that aspect of it as well, because there's just so much regulation they've got to deal with, and the cost to go along with it, employees, and the whole gamut of the problem.
Yeah, and one of the, thank you, Mayor, that's one of the points that I wanted to emphasize as well was this particular contractor said he'd much rather be a subcontractor than a general contractor because liability insurance and so on and so forth. So it has pushed some of these local, and then the availability of labor is also one of those big challenges. So imagine in Denver, you have plenty of a workforce, supposedly maybe higher numbers, but yet, and then for us, the transportation of building supplies also becomes a challenge. And the reason I'm putting that out there, because we want to go in there with our eyes open and really understand what are going to be some of the challenges for a project in rural Colorado. So.
I want to write some of these on the weaknesses over there, just in terms of lack of clarity on requirements. Need to update codes.
I think what I would kind of consolidate some of those comments for the state is, I think what I'm hearing is if there would be a request for the state to help facilitate at the state level a review of the National Association of Home Builders, advice on best practices, and the state advice on best practices, so that our local communities with less capacity could refer to those in reviewing code and have something that we know doesn't place us at higher liability, but doesn't increase our costs more than necessary, but also keeps us eligible for grants, something that could be some guidance coming down from the state as here's a minimum you should hit, here's best practices.
Here's a healthy way.
Yeah, and I think that would be a really good collaborative project that maybe the Division of Housing CHAFA and Housing Colorado could take on, because there is a statewide association that works specifically around housing. So that would be sort of my first go-to to find you answers, which we often do. So you know, as we're going through this, if you guys have ideas or things that you'd like more information, just reach out, and I'm always trying. But we have a lot of different folks that we can call on. And so I think that outlines a really nice request at the state level. I think there's, around building codes and thinking about model codes and suggestions specifically for more rural places, right? I think oftentimes our rural places or our smaller communities are adopting things that are meant for larger places and maybe different environments. So really thinking about who you are and what you all need as we look at that, and taking that back to the strings that are put on the money. Because if things are not applicable to you, then you should not have to be held to those same standards.
I wonder if this isn't an opportunity for us to start curating our 1271 grant money that's been awarded, as it is supposed to be evaluating codes. Is there a way we could, as a region, say, as obvious, these are our pain points that we're having. We want to specialize our code review on these particular topics and how we can mitigate some of these underlying barriers. Would that be something this group would be interested in potentially exploring? It kind of hits at what we're talking about, that we might be able to address these concerns immediately, because I feel like a state level study might take some time, for lack of a better term. So is there a way we could do this on our end and then kind of, lack of a better term, kick the butt of the state to say this is what we have to do because it doesn't exist? And I know we're all throughout this process we'll be able to talk about it, but if we can keep that in mind as we work through this, I think there might be a way where we can address these concerns sooner than later.
I would just say that any state or federal analysis of those codes, when we looked at a local text amendment around sprinkler systems, I had state lobbyists for sprinkler systems that were constantly telling me that I was going to burn every baby crib in the state if I didn't put sprinkler systems in affordable housing units, and it cost me $45,000 a unit in that meeting. So I think any state, James, make it right on, any state report is going to be heavily lobbied, just like the codes are.
Yeah, the other thing that comes to mind, so a couple thoughts here. I also practice architecture as well as planning, and so one of the things is the global supply chain, which is the building supply materials, the cost of materials has gone up exponentially. You could buy, plywood's like $78 a sheet right now, and it got up to like over $100 a sheet. And if you're developing large projects, if there was a way to augment the codes so that you could use more local materials, I'm building a house right now out of compressed earth block, which is like adobe, but easier to build with because it's more regular. And it's fire resistant, so you can use local materials, but there's no supply chain on the back end to supply the materials. And the codes are responding to global supply chains. And so the cost in a rural area is different, as is the knowledge base in a rural area, and that rural knowledge is also being lost too. So there's no skills there. So what you're talking about with training people and workers, there is a shortage of workers and craftspeople across the board, and it's a multi-part problem. The problem is not just education of craftsmen and workers, it's also global supply chain issues and local supply chain issues. If there was a way to work on that to develop housing so that you were building with more local materials, and if the codes could respond to that, because if you're building with something that's not in the traditional code, you have to use a different code piece, and that is onerous on anybody who's building. And anyone who hasn't done something with an alternative building code, which alternative building materials are like what's been used here for generations now, is now alternative. You have to use a code hack, like we're using the New Mexico code, which doesn't really apply, with onerous structural engineering, and so the codes are all twisted around what you're saying, lobbying, and it's not actually like helping rural developments and rural communities build housing, because everything's based on a global supply chain. So if there was a way to do green building and housing that was based on local supply chains, it could cut costs if you had the labor and the supply chain in places like that in place. So I see it as a multi-part problem, but I do see if you did have a checklist, the same way you go to a building department and you get a building checklist on your project, if you had one from the state that said at this size housing, if you're doing townhouses or if you're doing multifamily housing or if you're doing per unit, these are your resources, and then these are also the things that you're obligated to do, would be really helpful.
And I love where that's going, because it's really thinking about both the checklist that can streamline the processes, and then also what are the things we want to incentivize. So if our region is disproportionately affected by some of these things, and we have tools like tax increment finance, at least for the cities, you know, how can you structure your policies to offset those disproportionate burdens, right? And so then what we need to think about is for the counties and outside of the cities, what are the incentives or what are the things that we can do to help level the playing field so that things can happen in all of those places. So really thinking about the supports that we can put in there, whether that be expertise or capital.
And another challenge that I foresee also, if by using the whatever $200 per square foot building cost, if we're building at $200, say in the Denver metro area, where the median income is of course much higher, and you're building at $200 a square foot in Los Angeles County, where the median income is just, or where from the counties where it's that much lower, now we have another economic impediment for families to have access to the housing.
This is good. These guys are taking notes, so we're capturing everything, even if I'm not writing it down. Okay, so I think that our case studies are going to give us a lot more insight on this same topic. I will apologize. I have two case studies, and they're both from Walsenburg-Werfenow. I did have Kayvon Colette-Bari, who has done stuff both in Los Angeles and Werfenow, but he had said he would be here, but I know his dog had surgery this morning, and I think he might not have gotten out of the vet hospital yet. So we're going to go ahead, and we have Gay Davis and Karen Wilson to share case studies, and we're just going to keep these kind of short with these 4 questions. We will also include a little bit more of this in writing that we can use going forward, but just thinking about what was the housing project they were working on, what challenges did you face with local procedures, what challenges did you face with accessing capital or financial support, what challenges did you face accessing supplies and skills, and I think there was actually a last question, what would you propose as solutions or ideas to overcome the challenges? Okay, who wants to go first?
Mine's probably easier, maybe. So I actually have 2 projects. One particular project is in a historical building. For those of you unfamiliar with Walsenburg, I own Serendipity Coffee Shop, which is at the corner of 6th and Main. It has approximately 2,000 square feet on the 2nd floor that originally was constructed as a hotel that has the ability or capability from a design pro forma standpoint to have 4 apartments on it. So, you know, challenges from that perspective is it's designated locally historically. There's, you know, multitude of issues, you know, from an infrastructure standpoint, so it needs all new electrical and plumbing, a whole redesign, though the floor plan can be manipulated so that it retains a lot of the historical aspect. The exterior envelope is pretty solid, though. You know, I want to replace the roof before I get too far into it. So, biggest challenge I have there, obviously, is from a historical building, existing structure, code compliances from that standpoint when you're talking multi-units, and what I'm going to be facing. Capital is always an issue. I used to say I have more time than money, now I don't have either. So, you know, from that standpoint, that's what I'm facing with that particular unit. My second project is it's taken me a while, it's taken me 5 years to get to this point to say that this is where I am. But I own a mobile home park in Walsenburg. It's a historic, again, not designated, but it should be, a historic trailer court. It's zoned by the city of Walsenburg. However, the infrastructure is horrendous. 2019, the state of Colorado changed a lot of regulations regarding mobile home parks, which, you know, I'm in the process of becoming compliant with. But I think the biggest challenge there is working with, I currently have 6 tenants. It has the ability, it's a half a city block. It has the ability to really address affordable housing in Walsenburg. But it requires literally vacating the existing tenants, leveling it, redeveloping it, redesigning it so that it really can be affordable housing. So we're talking a long-term project there for several years. One of the regulations with the state now is that you have to give tenants a year in which to vacate. So the timing on that, knowing that this is a long-term project, is, you know, do I put them on notice now, or do I wait a while and be able to afford them some peace of mind that they're not having it. None of these units are movable, so I'm essentially making 6 potential families homeless in a long-term perspective. So anyway, there's my projects.
Mm-hmm.
Gray hair.
Now, what would be some potential solutions, or what would you see as the assistance that would make it possible for you?
Well, and I think, you know, when we're talking multi-units, I don't care who we are, I think that the biggest challenge, and one of the ones on the forefront, is obviously infrastructure. I can design the infrastructure within the park, but you know, one of the regulations in Walsenburg, for example, is that they're now requiring, instead of master meters, single meters, which, you know, when you're talking 15 water taps and 15 meters, and the same with San Isabel. So I think it's imperative that public utilities be brought into the picture here, and collaboratively we talk to them. And you know, I understand their infrastructure challenges, but at the same time, they're in the business to sell utilities, to sell the service. If they can't provide the service to where it's cost effective, then they're not getting any benefit from it. So, you know, they have to get past that they have to be willing to make an investment. So incentivize the utilities so that it becomes feasible for a developer to actually do something.
Mm-hmm.
Phase 1.
Okay. What are our thoughts?
Well, I just kind of filled in when you were talking about incentives, and that's something that we're planning on doing here. As a matter of fact, it was brought to us by Skid, by Michael. And one of the things that we're talking, of course, we have some funds available that it's going to be coming in front of council to be able to incentivize some of the developers for some utilities where we don't pay it to the contractor, but what we do is we backfill our department that has to put out the work for it.
Something.
Yeah. But we do have, you know, funds to begin that process right now.
Mm-hmm.
I know DOLA has some funding available for infrastructure. So I think it's getting these public utilities, municipalities, and the developer, and these resources available to say, okay, you know, as a developer, I can't apply for that money, but as a local entity, as a city of Walsenburg or the city of Trinidad, Los Angeles County, to apply for that to directly impact the opportunity to develop that would be huge.
And that did come up in our discussion just this last week, if there was some additional funds that we can apply from DOLA or to the state or wherever to add to the fund that we have so it can go on for a longer period of time.
And also to double up in certain cases
Right.
to make it more affordable for development.
In my case, my water tap was $4,100 to the city of Walsenburg. My San Isabel bill is $20,000 to $25,000, and I had expenses to get even ready for that. So, and that's just upgrading to code on my building. So, and then we have, then we have $80,000 of architect and engineering. So before I even get started, I'm $100,000.
Well, Karen, do you want to go ahead and do your case study, and then we'll keep track? Oh,
May
sorry.
I ask,
Okay.
how long have those families been there, and what's the timeline you think on the 4 units? Are you able to?
Eternity on the one answer.
They've lived there for an eternity?
Yes. The newest mobile home that is there is a 72 version.
Sorry, how long have the families resided in that mobile home?
Yeah, since 72.
So
Which is not eternity, I'll just say.
Depending
not
upon
from personal experience.
depending upon who you ask.
Right.
I don't think it's eternity, but they do. So, for the 4 units, I mean, I've owned the building now for 7 years, and it's fortunately the first floor is completely occupied with 3 different entities, one of which is a coffee shop. But the second floor has just been sort of a work in progress, and obviously I've got multiple other things that I've been doing. But it's as available. I chip away at an aspect of it, trying to move it forward. So potentially, from a design standpoint, the pro forma was done 4 years ago. Now it's construction costs. Can you legitimately afford to develop that and make them affordable? And 4 units in a historical building like that probably is going to cost me substantially more than $200 a square foot. So.
Sure. I'm just thinking that you have 6 families that you don't want to make homeless, and you have 4 apartments. I was just
No. Again, accessibility. Most of this population is older. Everybody has a dog, multiple dogs, cats, so there's some challenges there that probably.
The big thing is, everybody talks about affordable housing, it's no longer affordable, it's more like attainable.
Yeah.
And that's a stretch even.
So can I ask a question, just as a case study? The city of Trinidad is contemplating $25,000 a unit to go to a property owner like yourself that would be rehabbing upstairs. How far would $100,000 go in getting you moving?
It'd go substantially down the road. Well, 25 of that's going to be design, engineering, electrical, plumbing, but you could make a pretty good dent. You could probably at least get 2 units substantially along. Because like I say, structurally it's there.
Yeah, the idea behind the incentive package that the city is considering is that, if you think of a new unit is $250,000, and so a $25,000 investment is a 10% investment in bringing in an existing rehab. So you think that's enough of an incentive that would get you moving if it was?
Oh, it'd certainly get my attention.
Right.
From that standpoint, my background is grant writing, and for those of you, Lee Merkel used to be Department of Local Affairs. He used to call me the House of Cards lady. So with $100,000, what you can obviously do with that is begin to
Leverage it.
And the incentive would allow property owners to leverage this one.
I'm just curious, are there any limitations / potential restrictions on how that money is leveraged, or any idea about
No,
what that
the only cost that we're prohibiting is unskilled labor, because I think that's a really hard one. It's an easy one for a property owner to take potentially advantage of. Like it costs me $10,000 to paint the hallway kind of bill. But the skilled laborers like electricians and they will be able to document those expenses from the city standpoint. So
I will add that it's 25,000 per unit, because you said 100,000 would help you get 2 of them going, but that'd only be 50,000.
Right.
So that's just one thing to keep in mind.
And that's specifically for affordable housing, or?
So the requirement on the back end, because it's, again, so there's 2 things. If you go after grants, then you're beholden to the grantee, right? The grantor, sorry. If you take additional funds, so you might unbeknownstly tie yourself to a 80% AMI revenue cap as you take those things. But the agreement is for the first 2 years that at the time of CO, the property owner would agree to a voluntary rental agreement at renting at 100% AMI or less for the first 2 years of the unit. And then after that, the unit just has to remain a rental unit in the town. So that's the agreement that between the city and the property owner. Now, obviously, as you touch different funds, you are equivalent to those.
Michael, does it have to remain a rental unit in perpetuity?
It has to be owner occupied or a rental unit. So it also allows future condominium, it would allow it to be condominium licensed sold to. It just can't be a short term, basically, prohibition.
So looking at the example of $250 per unit for the owner, when you look at the AMI and the cost, the return on investment, then she would have no choice but to really increase the bottom cost of that unit to get her return on investment on a timely manner. If you're going to look at getting that money back in 30, 40 years, then the opportunity for the investors is limited.
Well, I think there's a big difference between new. So the 250 numbers in new construction.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So existing rehab, I mean, we all know
it could be higher.
We can walk down the street and we could say that there's probably a building in downtown Trinidad that are $500,000 a unit.
Sure.
But there's probably, I can't tell you how many buildings I've toured where there's cardboard boxes sitting on toilets and sinks that the units they're just vacant because the property owner doesn't have the initial investment to go out and access capital. Also in our region, mixed use funding is completely non-existent if you go into a local bank, especially if you don't have upfront capital again to put forward your risk loan. But if you really think of it from a property perspective, right now, how much are you making in rent on this 4 units?
None. I mean, not, yeah.
So the day she starts renting, when she starts to make more. So right now, it's a loss. It's a loss. So that's the idea behind downtown instead of the business.
Is there like a priority on like infill?
The council, they have an anti-dilapidated ordinance, and so this is something that kind of is a new one that the council also wants to consider that funding for.
Okay, cool.
And they actually have identified properties, so that's great. So there's actually a physical list, so it's not just any property. So I think that fund would be expanded to not just vacant upstairs downtown, but also the anti-dilapidated ordinance. So either of those properties, if a property owner wanted to take advantage of the 25,000 per unit.
I think that, like I said, we actually have just a hair over $3 million that we're looking at incentives. Now considering the 1.5 initially and that other 1.5 to either expand the program, or in this particular case, I'm not sure if we could use that money, that other 1.5 to leverage to build additional funding to continue on. So I'm not sure if there is funding out there through DOLA or other resources.
So the city's putting up the 1.5 from just general fund?
From the various funds that we have, it's I think through the marijuana funds, right? Correct. It's through the marijuana funds that we have.
And you're not yet using TIF?
Yes, we are.
You are.
Yeah, Toro is doing
Oh, that's all through TURA.
No, this is separate.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think the TIF is added into this incentive program at this point.
But could.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we can leverage that other 1.5 to get some additional funding to expand the program to maybe give more allowances for the developers, I think that's something that we would really be interested in.
So there's not a terrible amount of funding that exists right now, but I do know that DOLA is looking at some prioritizing funding for infill development for communities. There's a grant coming out from the Community Development Office called Stronger Communities. And realistically, the timeline on that is probably several months out before it becomes, the program becomes workable. But I do know moving forward that is the direction DOLA is looking at for programs. So if you continue to think about infill development and continue to think of opportunities where you can leverage matching funds from incentive programs, well, I can't say that's going to award you a grant, but I do know that that would make you a little bit more competitive versus what I've seen grants come in right now, if you understand what I'm saying.
And that's one thing that we are really concentrating on versus infill.
Right. Yeah, that's where we've been seeing a lot of the infrastructure challenges, because every community who's looking for new construction is like, we got to address our infrastructure. So by attracting or focusing towards infill, it makes a little bit better use case for rehabilitation right now. But we're still in the early phases, but that is something that we are aware of and that we are trying to figure out programming and funding for in the future.
So if you could, I'd like to tag on to that and what Commissioner Lopez was talking about, this cheat sheet. We heard all this legislation coming out that, hey, there's all these funds here, and all the legislators are pounding their chest all proud, but it's like, okay, how do we get them? That's DOLA. They've got to come up with all these policies. So when you come up with all those, that cheat sheet would be helpful for whoever to say, okay, now I know how to get these funds, not just that they're there. So
Because,
Extended timelines too.
so I think there's a couple different things, and if we think outside the box, we could look at this in a number of different ways, right? So there's the costs and the rising costs, and you guys are saying that the costs are rising, one, because of the cost of materials, and two, because of the lack of workforce, right? In addition to all of the other things in the world that are happening. So one of the big goals for regional collaboration, forget who said it, was the idea of bulk buying and how we can get supplies out here. So are there ways that we can not only provide maybe money to help these things happen, but reduce the cost of supplies? Or are there ways to build workforce? So what if some of the incentive programs included using local workforce, and it could tie into some of the stuff that Trinidad State is doing? Are there other ways to bring costs down in addition to putting more money out there? And I'm just trying to think outside of the box, like different ways to get it done.
Anytime you get into housing, you have so many components in the building.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about thousands, and bulk buying would be difficult to achieve.
So I think economy of scale is the vernacular that we're using. I think that there's some common denominators. I mean, everybody's got toilets. Everyone has, and the availability of just something simple like fixtures, the availability of electrical components, wiring is astronomical right now. You can't hardly even find boxes, let alone, anything related to breaker panels and all of that stuff. It's just escalated to a point. So, if from a regional standpoint, there was a buyer's pool, some kind of agreement perhaps with some of the suppliers, and not that we have, this is the perfect one, but I'll use Blazer Electric out of Pueblo, supplies a lot of both electricians as well as other entities. If you could have some kind of conversation from that standpoint and say, hey, we're gonna have 10, 20 units that we're constructing here, can we get a break, a percentage break on the cost of materials.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not that that's perfect, but.
If I understand what you're saying, please correct me, you're looking at maybe an opportunity where we can start batch building housing, so if we could get.
So say we take the opportunity inventory, the opportunity site inventory that we're building, and we say, okay, there's this many units that would likely be coming online in the next 2 years, and they're all going to need these electrical boxes. And so then we could say, okay, these items, or they're all going to need toilets, or they're all going to need whatever. So if as a region you could actually create an inventory of what's going to come online in the next 1, 2, 3 years, and then you make that arrangement in bulk with a supplier.
The
Does that sound?
only problem I see there is there's 1,000 different colors of toilets.
It's true.
1,000 different colors of faucets.
It's true.
And electrical panels that are needed. And I'm not really sure if that is really our job of what we're trying to do here.
Mm-hmm.
Because that, to me, that would be the building industry. That would be their job to come together as a group to try to do something like that, if they're even willing to do it. I'm not really sure if that is our job to try to come up with a.
I think there's a hybrid, though, right? If the community builds that inventory of sites that are coming and can communicate in a to the private sector and be marketing that these things are happening in our region and in our community, then that hopefully from the private sector, businesses would start to pay attention, right? The hope is over time, we have more of those resources come here. So maybe it's just us doing a better job of getting the word out with the data we compile.
Mm-hmm.
A clarification from Dola. Since a lot of these incentive dollars are coming from the ARP funds and or who knows, related from the federal government, are these, one of the comments that I have heard is that these dollars have to be, they have to adhere to the Davis-Bacon law of wages. So even though DOLA is the pass-through, the point of origination came from the federal government. Can you clarify that? Because otherwise, that's also going to add an additional challenge and burden for locals to spend that money, and then now you have two different scales. So much percentage came from the federal government, so wage differential as well.
Felix, wasn't there some legislation that was put forward this last year about the Davis-Bacon wages on certain projects?
I believe it was.
I'm not sure if it ever went through or if
And again, that's what, one of the questions that also needs clarification.
I don't have a definitive answer for you, and I can double check. What I can say is, while working with other communities through ARPA fundings, they have had to follow most of the federal guidelines because it is tax without it. So I'm not 100% positive, but there seems to be a trend of that occurring. So I will ask for you and get that information for you.
All right. So, all right, well, let's move on to our next case study with Karen Wilson in La Plaza. And we'll just continue the conversation, and I think throwing out ideas so we can outline, all the different things that we want to investigate, what's possible out there.
So I am La Plaza Inn in Walsenburg, and that's a historic building, 1907, and it's 10,200 square feet, 2 floors, each one 5,100. And I bought it in 2010 and renovated it and put in a restaurant and renovated it into a B&B. There's 11 rooms upstairs, a conference room, a bar, and a cafe, and a dining room, and a really nice patio. So that has this 100-year-old tree in the middle of it. So I got with Keith Willie with CPACE, and then I don't know if Los Angeles County does does it or not, but Huerfano County, allows CPACE. And,
We have it as well.
okay, so, for those that don't know, it's an energy improvement and it is paid through your property taxes and it stays with the building versus being personally, responsible. So, that way you can sell your building and you still have it there. And Keith is a local CPACE person, so we were starting to do some rehab on some energy improvements, and one of the biggest things I needed was a new roof, so we arranged for that, and in the process of getting this new roof, the roofer took the roof off and then halfway covered it, and we had a big windstorm and 4 days of rain, and we flooded the hotel substantially. So then we had to then they wouldn't do any remediation of it at all until they did asbestos testing, which it had asbestos. So then it was like 3 months before they finished the asbestos, and by then it was now molded. So it became a big thing. So I used to chair economic development, and I was there when we did our housing study, and so I was very aware of our lack of housing. So rethinking now that you have to redo this whole building, I thought, well, I'll just change it. And so I was gonna put in apartments versus a B&B and rechange everything, because I have to do everything all over now. And so I was initially going to put 2 more apartments downstairs and put apartments upstairs. And the city of Walsenburg has these rules that they put in, that one, for each time you put in new housing in downtown, you have to have 2 off-street parking spaces. And they have another one that you can only have 1 housing unit downstairs in each building. And they have another one that housing can only be a percentage of the square footage. And they have another one that you can't have housing being able to enter. This building actually has 3 addresses, so I end up now in front of the planning and zoning with looking for variances. So in Walsenburg City, you can have any size house you want, and you only have to have 1 parking space. It could be an 8,000 square foot house, and you still only are required to have 1. But once they put this thing in the city, we've not had it 1 unit of housing in downtown, to my knowledge. So they effectively are killing the housing. So what ends up is I get 1 apartment added downstairs because I have 3 addresses. And I negotiate with them to get 1 parking space per unit. And I lease parking the back of several other buildings in order to be able to accommodate that.
Off-street parking.
Off-street parking.
Yeah, that's the other challenge.
And during this planning and zoning, they were still all, even though I got every business around me from the bank all around that gave me letters that parking, my business has never impeded their business with parking. They still believed that I had to have off-street parking. And it was a pretty big beating. And originally from Orfano County. So that puts me at a disadvantage. So I end up, so my zoning is square footage, number of units, location of units, and also I got dumpster issues because they don't want a dumpster on the street. So I had to take out the fence, take out the pavers, redo everything in the back in order to put the dumpster in my back patio. So, but if you were from Orfano County or the city, then you can come right behind me and you don't have to have any of those requirements, and they waive them. So, having it be the same all over would be wonderful if they were always applied the same way. But, I have costs like you wouldn't believe to rent parking, and somebody else, they don't require it. So.
Are you operational now? Is all that behind you, or you're still?
Oh, no,
working for it?
I finished demo and I'm in construction. I'm framing and I have electrical, and someday I might get my plumber and HVAC in here, but.
How about a psychiatrist?
I have a drinking problem now.
For her, after all that, that's traumatic. That's traumatic.
Oh, man. Did the city of Walsenburg ever offer, when we had the asbestos problem for abatement through the Brownsfield application process?
No. No.
Capacity.
The capacity of the city, who obviously isn't here, is pretty limited, and the capacity of the planning and zoning is even more limited. So, they.
Unfortunately, as a private property owner, you are better off navigating things yourself, and then going to them with completed applications and asking for their signature, and hopefully they'll approve a flow-through grant. I mean, that's your best hope.
Yeah.
But you're better off if you can manage it yourself. Yeah, you're better off managing it yourself, applying for it, managing it yourself, and just having them sign it. And
Yeah,
I think that's across the board.
So it could be a coin flip in the end, whether you get any blessing.
Exactly.
No, you have to really, it was difficult. I had an architect that specializes in old buildings and renovations of them. He is in Loveland, Colorado, and he was on Zoom on that meeting for planning and zoning, and he is on the planning and zoning in Loveland, and said that was the biggest shit show he's ever seen in his life. So you have people like arguing with me that I'm still gonna have cars in the front when the restaurant's open. And you're gonna have cars there, and I'm like, ma'am, cars are a good thing. They like, that means you've got business, and when I have business, I have sales tax for you. So that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
One of the things that I see, and you bring up a good point, is the problems that exist with everything you're going through. Is that we're talking, the initial conversations talking about regional collaboration. And I see Trinidad maybe as a lot more progressive as Walsenburg. And to be able to come to an agreement between a regional component, especially Walsenburg, which is the next size community, next size city, Trinidad, to come to an agreement would almost be impossible.
I don't think it's quite impossible. I think that the planning and zoning, so we talk about capacity of communities. They've talked about trying to go through their ordinances and code compliance issues and things now for 3 years that I know of. But again, no one has the ability or the wherewithal to do it line by line. So I think if what they unilaterally have done is adopted, you know, something across the board without necessarily identifying what obstacles that proposes. So I think that from the city of Walsenburg standpoint, that they would be open to someone coming in and saying, let's look at this from a regional standpoint, and, you know, if someone else was doing the mind-numbing aspect of it, where they could weigh in on what was specific to that community, I think they would embrace it.
And here's the good news. You guys both received that IHOP grant, and it's going to look at your code and regulation and identify barriers and make recommendations. So, City of Walsenburg may not have a manager at the moment, but you're signed on for that grant. And Huerfano County's on that grant as well. Trinidad has the same grant. And you all could actually take those recommendations and use them with your new leadership. I mean, I think in some ways it's kind of neat. Mike, we never want to see you leave. I was so excited when you came in, but because you know the city, and I thought that was really important. But as you both have new leaders coming in, you also have a study that's going to take the baseline here and give you potential to raise your standards. You know, or lower, depending on anything. But to really look at where you are, what you're requiring, and how you can get things done. So if you, as two different entities with two different grants, if you can streamline those and bring those together, I think it gives you an opportunity you have not had in the past. And the beautiful thing is that, and correct me if I'm saying this wrong, James, by getting those IHOP funds, you are now more eligible, or you sort of hit the first rung for eligibility for this next round of grants called IHOI, which is all about infrastructure, right? So by doing that successfully, you're now also sort of in line to get that. And for Los Animas County, even though you don't have the IHOP funds, there's another pot of money, the Stronger Communities, that is for those folks. And those IHOI and Stronger Communities are both going to be fall, right? So what we need to do is think about the application and what you need in that application. How do we make you really competitive to get past that red tape, to get through this, so that you can use this research that you're going to do with the IHOP and get y'all really competitive and ready to apply for these this fall. So that's not, I mean, you know, sure, fall sounds far away, but it's not. And so I think that needs to be a major focus of this group. Now the trick is, as consultants working on this project, I don't think we're allowed to actually help you write grants. But we can help you flesh out ideas, we can talk about your goals, we can put together, you know, all of the background and that sort of thing. But you also have a lot of people with grant writing experience here at the table. So that might be one of those sort of side work groups that we want to think about at the end of our conversation today.
The big conundrum that we have here, though, is, like, since some of these funds to apply for them this fall, the problem is we need somehow to get started immediately. Because to give you a good example, and I know Kayla from the mine is on, and they've been searching and trying to come up with housing needs that they have for their employees that they currently have, which are very minimal, even though they've employed quite a few. But they're talking about expanding their employee pool up to, what, 250 to 300 people in the next year or so. And that's only part of it. There's other things that are happening. So the need is like now, and how do, can't we wait until the fall for application and all the process? That's the problem.
I think that the one white paper that we need to have is, you said the IHOP and all the other acronyms. Then I think we say is this grant is due, and then a timeline, because when you get on the websites, I mean, there is so much information in there.
Right.
And quite honestly, it's overwhelming. When you're looking to write a grant, what are the terms? When is it due? Who has that? So if we're able to streamline and create one white paper, that cheat sheet that we're all talking about, it gives an opportunity to say, you know what, I think the county or the city or we're eligible for this, is do this, and then, creating the partnership. We have that locally. And just the jargon and the acronyms, and then that's fine. But I think then you throw in there the legislative session that just closed, and that created just another level of complexity, and I feel for you.
And James, I saw you trying to talk.
What I think the real value of this opportunity to having our codes inspected and trying to have this regional partnership is we're going to be more competitive for future grant opportunities, not just the ones that are at our door right now. Some of the other communities who have already had some of this alignment are already pretty competitive and have, as you've seen, have had success when it comes to some of the larger grants. We could be those communities too. The only thing that's missing is having some similarity in our codes, and as part of that IHOP grant, where there's going to be a piece where we have to adopt some strategies. It doesn't mean we have to adopt the most aggressive strategy there is, but there does need to be some sort of evaluation of, the consultant said this is not working. Let's try to figure out a way we can make our positioning or our community more accepted to growth in any of the capacity we identify as healthy for our community. So once we have that narrative down, we'll be more competitive for future grant funding that continues to come out of DOLA and other organizations. Because once you can understand and figure out how to apply to a DOLA grant, the other grant should be just as difficult to do as well. So I would just say continue to just get some synergy on what our goals are for the community, and that will just continue to have wonderful outcomes as we continue to go through this process. As you've already identified in the beginning, this is a national crisis. Every community is trying to evaluate housing. So we don't have an answer straight up just yet, but by working through these pain points and finding some synergy, we can start to come to find some solutions together.
And
one of the things that they're showing is, we looked at that, and on under weaknesses, the first item up there is contractors availability.
Right.
That is our number one problem. And I can't remember who I talked to recently, and I'm not sure if it was DOLA or who it was. And one of the things I think that DOLA or legislators should come up with is funding for rural communities that are struggling to get contractors locally, where they will say, if you will come in and build 10 units, you fund it originally. If you complete that project, then there's a fund back there that will refund back to you X number of dollars because you've come in to help the rural community to expand their housing needs. That's one way to attract contractors to come into a community to build.
Is there a way us as a region can do that? And then say, DOLA, look how much success we've had with this program. If you gave us X number of whatever, some additional capacity, we can turn this program from helping this community to our entire region.
Well, that's what we're doing with our incentive program,
exactly.
To try to help. But that it has to get expanded further than that.
Exactly. My personal experience with DOLA, I find that when trying to get information across to the state, case studies work very, very well. Having concepts of new ideas, while appreciated, having the ability to show this is how we did it, here's some of the problems we solved or problems we came across and solved ourselves, we want to expand the capacity, works pretty well when it comes to finding additional funds for resources.
And we need to be looking at not necessarily case studies locally, but this, like you said, this is a universal problem. There are communities all over the country that have done this, that are in the same boat, but they also have some successes. We need to be looking at those because then that can help drive some of the decisions and maybe mitigate some of the landmines that we want to avoid. And then secondly, to address your concern about the immediate need versus getting funding down the road, there's kind of a pipeline. Like there's a pipeline of these fundings and there's always a lag time. But if that is the constant excuse that like, well, we need the money now, which yes, we need the money now, But then if we don't apply for the funds down the road, then you still don't have the funding.
Right.
You know, the saying is, the best day to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best day is today. So we didn't do it yesterday, let's do it today. So I think that's the positive, is if we get these resources to kind of help outline like what are the funding sources that are applicable to us as a region that we can apply, then we can kind of set up that kind of timeline and what's going to address the needs of Walsenburg versus Huerfano versus Los Animas versus Trinidad State, whatever. That's kind of what we're hoping to at least get a framework from today. Like what kind of are those first steps that we can do to address those long-term needs, but also recognizing that the short-term needs are huge. Like the line needs of the housing now. Yes, we do. So I think that kind of frames the general.
Yeah. And I
have a quick question just with Karen, in Wolfsburg, do they have form-based codes or any kind of metro district that would be helpful? Or is
They use 2015, and then they have a bunch of municipal codes.
But they don't have like an overlay district for that area where you could literally have like a downtown district. I did that for years with transportation, where you did kind of an overlay district on the downtown area. And form-based codes that were specific to that area so that you could do different types of uses and change parking requirements too.
Well, the county built a judicial center in the middle of a road and had 100 parking spaces that got added to parking in downtown, and it's they don't even consider that they probably don't really have a parking problem.
Well, there's always spaces in front. I mean,
There's
not a parking problem. So, like, looking at it from a form-based issue instead of just a stupid zoning rule issue. I mean, it seems like there could be just a little bit of thought put to it, and then a little bit of a
I had letters from the architect. We had studies. We did put everything in front of them, and it didn't make any difference.
So I don't know where Walsenburg is in their IHOP, but the city of Trinidad, once we got the signed contract, we hopped on. Actually, the RFQ is out there today. We started advertising for consultants.
Oh, really?
I don't know if we could collaborate or not to help through this issue, but we're moving forward.
Yeah,
Maybe our
that's the other.
county
I was gonna say, you got
commissioner
John sitting over there.
help them.
Well, that's the other thing, what John said about having the same codes. If you had the same codes, like if you had the same form-based codes in Los Animas County and Walsenburg County, and even being from Huerfano County, I could say that, it could be a little bit behind in the zoning. But like, with the same codes, it just would help the whole region, quite honestly. To have the exact same thing, like what you were talking
One quick
about.
note, Electra, Walsenburg is looking for an administrator.
I'm not going to apply.
Thank you. Okay.
So we go through them every year. So
It's not a long commitment. So a quick question. Trinidad's RFQ is out. Where is the IHOP with?
We signed, the county signed the contract yesterday. So since it was a city and county combined application, we're waiting for the city of Walsenburg also.
A signed contract for
IHOP.
For the
grant.
grant.
So then it's a question now of developing an RFQ.
I think Carl has that basically ready to go. We need Walsenburg to sign the contract for.
If you want to ask Carl,
And Carl's on the line.
Is that available for review, the RFQ?
I do not know.
So
I think it would be good to maybe look at theirs as, maybe you guys can line up. But our lunch has arrived, and I want to ask, I know at least Wally has a 1:30, but we're likely going to go a little bit over. And I wanted to just see how many people could stay 15 minutes later till 1:15.
My 1:30 got moved to 2, and it's in this room.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
But that's good to know, because we get to be in this room.
Yeah, I'd like to give everybody a break.
I have to do that one.
At 1? Okay. Well, we'll try and get through as much as we can.
We could probably take about 10 minutes.
Yeah, why don't you do
and
10
then we can
minutes?
keep talking.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're gonna get to solutions and next steps, so we'll adjust our plan to make sure that we get what we need out of today. But do go grab some pizza, take a break for a sec, and I'm gonna set my alarm.
It's cheese, pepperoni, vegetarian, and meat.
10 minutes.
And there's salad.
And I'm strict.
And there's
Good,
because you need to be studied.
we should go through this.
Yeah. You name it, David, we gotta go in order. This is not going very fast.
Good seeing you again. How you doing?
Just saying.
I appreciate your questions. Yeah, stronger communities. It's not yet. We're still hired for the program stuff, but it seems like it's going to be this week. I have that was like, we need funding for it. Doesn't exist. So this is part of legislation.
Well, that's a bad one. Water bill.
Cities that have like either are doing like daily housing to then rebuild the housing. Does that make sense?
I'll give you one.
It's still in its inception, but what I know is this ordinance bill, and it's for communities like the one we were talking about. There's like, I have my community to play in my community, yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's like what they're talking about on Wall Street. You have to adopt a set of codes. It doesn't apply broadly in the same way. You know, it just doesn't.
Hey.
Exactly.
Is it? Oh, good.
It's margin for the individual builder or the investor or something. And I think something like this could be really.
See, that's what we need. I mean, we share corners.
Because like,
We share corners. I
I
mean, even though we're
like
elected corners, you know, so we do choose
I'll meetings. Like 99% of
the
the
county
listening.
and they do
And try to guide instead of
building
building.
codes. They should do it with zoning codes as well to
So-
make it easy.
Well, immediately
I
after
mean,
we have
Montrose County, or not Montrose,
a
but
grant
in
of
Montrose,
different
they use a different.
Right, basically doing this
land
for
use
assembly
ordinance.
matters.
Right.
The same
And
building
putting together our
together
directory
with different
so
codes.
we
Like,
can-
we have
And if
to.
it has this concept of, if everybody kind of collaborated on my house, and then they're creating, because of course, Lolita and Trinidad won't be all the same things. But if it could kind of streamline it, whereas here's the most goals at the very end, then that would be the
Yes,
research that would help all of us. Right?
Well, it's actually because they are being.
But I just want to make sure.
Is they don't answer questions because they don't know, right?
All right.
The code enforcement
Well,
is not
yeah.
an inspector.
We
He
need
doesn't
to
give
clean
that
up.
advice because he doesn't know who is responsible, right? So at the very least, you know, in real estate, they say be the source of the source. Don't give the answer.
Right.
But if I could hand that out, here you go, right? At least then there's a little less of this. How do we have it? Yeah.
You're right. I want to tell you that I took my mailbox
Oh, wait,
that I was trying to
yeah.
buy to the post office. They said, oh, we don't have anything to do with that, that goes to zoning. And, you know, the last place I want to go is planning and zoning.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, thanks, we're just gonna put that up. Well, and that's the whole point, because then you start doing, everyone's asking for forgiveness instead of permission.
I want to say thank you. I have another meeting at the
Cascade
Ratchet.
of trouble.
But Phil is going to stay back and.
Yeah.
No, I called him.
He is. We like him, so
Yeah.
we're going to keep.
I mean,
I
Even if he doesn't know.
Yeah,
That's something you didn't even think so much.
Yeah, thank you for being a part of it.
Well, I did.
Great stuff for you to work on too.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Right.
See you later. Take care. Have a good day. So I'll follow up with you later.
There's so many opportunities to work with
Very good.
your program.
Good to see you, sir. See you. Yes.
Yeah, we just need some students.
Come on, you got your hands full.
I'm gonna add that over here. Hey,
So I have to leave, I'm actually rewriting Hunter's Lane's code today.
Yes, yes.
And so I have to leave at 1 to get there.
okay.
But if you'd like me to show you the Southeastern Plains stuff,
Can we do that right,
then I don't have to bounce.
okay, perfect, we'll do
I
that right away.
apologize, did I send it, I thought it was an hour drive, it's an hour and a half.
Oh, yeah.
We're not there, pretty much.
Well, on top of
Depends
that,
on how
insurance
fast
hasn't
brave
paid
you are.
me anything.
I can drive fast.
Well, no,
But
they gave me
it's still-
$130,000.
I forgot, Walsenburg is in
Yours are the contractors.
This is the next.
You're going to La Junta?
Mine because I
Go
have
through camp.
replacement value insurance and
As I say, get
the
30
contractor
You can
had
just take
only
15,
actual
right,
cost
it's 70 miles.
things, I have to go through mine.
70 miles going 90.
Then we'll go get it done.
No, I mean, it's-
Contractor.
Hey there.
It's a
I didn't
two-lane
get to
road,
say
it's
hi
a
to you,
one-way
Rick.
turn.
Nice to
I've
see
done
you.
this.
I'll let you
Yeah.
eat.
Yeah,
Thank you for
it's
being
the
here.
circle will never end.
I also have to go, I have an apartment there.
Yeah, they sent me
that has
$130,000 on the $3 million
closed,
raise.
so it's gonna be about, so I'd like to get there first, open the windows, so that tonight I might actually sleep.
There's your other house.
Yeah.
350 over, I would send in that.
But you can't even get, the post office doesn't even know what to do with trying to put in units.
A lot simpler than
Karen,
Sure.
is your restaurant open?
No,
No. So, how long have you been, like, totally?
since May of last year, May 2nd of last year.
And that's because the roof issue, until you get that fixed.
Well, I have the roof sort of fixed, but that contractor disappeared, so I had to hire someone else to come in and finish fixing it. And $130,000 from State Farm. Never, ever have State Farm.
What's your timeline for at least getting the restaurant?
It'll all go back online at the same time.
Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
Well, I put the tax credit.
It is such a-
So I'm sure hoping that
I wish, I was like, they were like, James, what are some of the things you wish you would have? Travel budget. So like the amount of work we get done, like able to come into the communities and talk. So thank you for letting me join this meeting. I really appreciate it. It's amazing. Right now, I'm looking to try to move to a little bit more affordable place. So, but right now, I'm good. So, you know anyone's on?
A lot of people are
Sorry. Too hypercritical, but.
So when did you move to Trinidad?
I started work on April 4th. So I didn't hear in March.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, maybe.
On Trinidad?
So our community call it they actually were rolling.
We have 5 good heads.
Yeah, that's
Do you guys have a shuttle bus like program? My fault. I didn't know. This week is just
It's about a third of our.
I didn't even tell them well, the only thing that I'm worried about is construction tax. And I was I'm like,
But they've been taking towns, we used to be college.
And every year,
Because they've started looking to high school. Sort of.
you'll have to support and a lot of parents will do things from a general perspective. Where do you take that? Right. She was talking about, they're actually renting two houses. I think the house already now spent. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe 3 months ago.
Take a bite.
Yeah. I took a month off.
Internal dental visiting stool for 3 days. So I have just that repeated again.
How long did you guys break for lunch? How long did you guys break for lunch? Just recently?